All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, as you gain life experience, you start to understand that oftentimes when people attempt to disrupt the harmony that you may have between yourself and themselves, it is due to the fact that they have an ulterior motive. For the most part, the arguments that people start with you that you believe came out of the blue is to conceal the fact that the actual beef that they have with you has nothing to do with what they're arguing with you about. Why do I say all that? Because as I've been telling you brothers for a very long time, this issue with the Colin Kaepernick protest was actually used to mask other issues that many constituents within the NFL had with the upper levels, the upper echelons of the National Football League. The players are very unhappy with the collective bargaining agreement that was ratified a few years ago. They realize that they have been drastically undersold. And even Colin Kaepernick, who even though he claims he was kneeling because of the police brutality all across the country, it actually was revealed that the reason why he's been pursuing this collusion lawsuit against the NFL is in an attempt to decertify the collective bargaining agreement and give the NFL players a chance to renegotiate with the owners from scratch. And in addition to that, Colin Kaepernick is a pawn of the Marxist international bankers, but that's another video. That's a whole other topic for another day. The point being is this: you're starting to see more and more affluent NFL players complain about the fact that their contracts are not fully guaranteed, which I don't believe is ever going to happen because the liability to the owners is going to be too great based off of what is asked of the players just to participate in the NFL. So of course they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
NFL players looking to get paid have got to be anxious for the year 2020 when the current collective bargaining agreement expires. One player
in 2020, when the current collective bargaining agreement expires, all hell is going to break loose. And we're going to see woke meatheadism from NFL players like we've never seen before. You're going to see emotionality from these NFL players like you've never seen before, because they're going to realize that they don't have the vittles, they don't have the provisions to go into trench warfare with the NFL owners. They find this out during every collective bargaining agreement negotiation process, and they learn the hard way. They learn the hardest way, which oftentimes is that they don't learn at all. They're going to throw a lot of tantrums, and eventually they're going to sign the deal that the NFL owners want them to sign. Because there's no way that when you have a 30-team league like the NFL has, or 32 teams, how many teams are in the NFL, with over 50 players per roster, that they're going to be able to deal with the level of trench warfare that it would take for the NFL players to get fully guaranteed contracts for everyone on the roster. I think that there's a possibility that the NFL owners may say, you know what, we'll give fully guaranteed contracts to the top 5 or maybe even the top 10 players on the team. But for everyone on the team, no way.
With some thoughts on what they should change in negotiations was Chargers left tackle Russell Okung, who took to Twitter to discuss the way guaranteed contracts are handled in the NFL, saying this: "I will never understand how billionaire team owners have convinced the public that the players who put their bodies on the line every week and make less than 50% of league revenue are the ungrateful ones."
Well, Russell Okung, I don't think that the NFL owners have to go to great lengths to convince the fans of the National Football League that the players are ungrateful. I think that naturally the fans believe that you guys are ungrateful. I believe that they view you as a bunch of Negroes who should be happy that you made it out of the ghetto. I'm just being real with you. Once again, the main viewership of the NFL are Caucasians from Middle America, conservative Caucasians from Middle America, who see a sport that is comprised of 70% so-called black men, and they say to themselves, these Negroes are fortunate to be where they're at. They should not be complaining. They're making millions of dollars to play a game that I played in high school. That's the thing about sports. You're never going to get the average person to actually believe that you're deserving of the money that you're making, because at one point in time in their life, they did what you're doing, even though you're doing it at the highest level. They still believe that they could do it. There was a stat that I saw on one of these sports shows, I believe it was Colin Cowherd, where it was stated by over 70% of men that they think that the only reason why they never made it into the professional sports world is because there was a coach that had it out for them. So I think that there are a myriad of reasons as to why fans have no problem casting many professional athletes, especially in football and basketball, as ungrateful. The main reason being that basketball and football are dominated by so-called black men. But Russell Okung is just another example of the rampant lack of self-awareness that is oftentimes exhibited by woke, liberal black athletes. Very unfortunate.
Considering football's level of imminent physicality, high turnover, as well as the short life cycle of its participants, it would seem to me that NFL players are in the most need of fully guaranteed contracts.
Well, Russell Okung, what you stated is the exact reason why the NFL owners do not want to give you fully guaranteed contracts, because it puts them far too heavily in the position where they have to accept liabilities. If you're the owner of the Houston Texans or of the Tennessee Titans, and you decide that you're going to give your free safety a fully guaranteed 5-year deal worth $80 million, and then 5 games into the first year of his contract, he gets his spine snapped in half, but you still have to pay him 85% of his contract because it's fully guaranteed. Do you think that they're going to believe that that's good business practice because they're doing things in quote-unquote good faith? That's not going to happen. At some point, you have to accept the field of endeavor that you decided to partake in. To make a long story short, brother, you chose the wrong sport.
Now, keep in mind, the Packers are hoping to get a contract extension with Aaron Rodgers done soon. Obviously, many think he's the best quarterback in football, him or Tom Brady. But, Stephen A., what impact will the Rodgers contract have on the next CBA?
The impact that Aaron Rodgers' contract will have will basically be that if you're in the top 0.5% of the NFL, you have a good chance of getting a fully guaranteed contract, particularly if you're a quarterback. It's not going to have a trickle-down effect, so please don't try to act as if it is. Once again, when the NFL owners and players have the next collective bargaining agreement negotiations in 2020, I think that there could be the potential for the NFL players to get the owners to accept that the top 5 or maybe even 10 players on a team could be the recipients of fully guaranteed contracts. But there will never be a time when all 53 players will get fully guaranteed contracts. That's just not the nature of the beast in the NFL. The sport is too collision-oriented.
Well, my hope is that it will have the kind of impact that LeBron James has. And here's where my belief lies.
Let me say this very quickly before Stephen A. Smith goes into his liberal black spiel about LeBron James, because it's clear that he's trying to make a correlation between Aaron Rodgers and LeBron James. LeBron James does a lot for his community, but for all intents and purposes, a lot of the narrative that is pushed and perpetuated about LeBron as being this socially conscious individual that's changing things is narrative. LeBron James is not someone that makes waves. He's someone who rides waves. What does that mean? He's not going to say something with substance that's going to cause repercussions where he's going to be brought before media and he's going to be able to answer questions. He's not a Muhammad Ali. Not at all. He rides waves. He'll see what other athletes are doing, and then he'll confer with his corporate sponsors like Nike and decide if it's best for him to jump on board and ride that wave along with a Colin Kaepernick or with a whoever, because it has to be what's best for his brand. So LeBron James is not someone that you would use as an end sample for a player that makes changes in regards to overall culture. Now, if you're talking about in regards to the financial aspect of the NBA, and how LeBron may have affected the financial aspect of the NBA by deciding to take his destiny into his own hands by going from one team to another and showing players that they should not be loyal to a franchise. I don't think that the NFL, the architecture of that league is not the same as the NBA. The NBA only has 13 or 14 players on their roster. The NFL has 53. So once again, you cannot use Aaron Rodgers, who is in the top 0.05% of all NFL players, and say, what he does is going to trickle down like what LeBron did in the NBA. Because in the NBA, you could be a role player and make $18 million a year because you can come off the bench and score 13 points in 27 minutes a game. In the NFL, you're not going to be the third string safety and get a fully guaranteed contract. Never.
LeBron James and his camp have repeatedly stated to me throughout the years that those days in Miami were over. Taking less, that is. The best player in the world sends a bad message and sets a bad precedent when he's willing to accept less than the max deal in order to be on board for a team. Because that lets the owners off the hook. Because the owners certainly are not trying to take less than what they should. So why should a player who's responsible for being a marquee and generating revenue for the sport be obligated to take the same? That's what Russell Okung was alluding to when he said what he said. I understand that thinking, and I think...
Is that truly what Russell Okung was saying, brother? Or was he just saying that we all need to have fully guaranteed contracts? Was he saying that we all have to push the envelope in regards to getting max deals? Or was he saying that whether you're the 53rd man and you're going to be signed to the team for the whole season, that your guaranteed money should definitely come to you, and you should not, even if you get cut, you should still get your slice of the pie? Or is he saying, as you're trying to correlate with LeBron James, that an Aaron Rodgers should push it to the max? I don't think that he's concerned about Aaron Rodgers. I think he's concerned about making sure that when players sign deals with these NFL owners, that even if they fall due to injury, that they can get their money. That's truly what this is about, Stephen A. It's not about pushing the envelope for the upper echelon players. It's making sure that everyone in the NFL can get their money should they fall prey to injury.
I think somebody as great as Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay Packers go to the playoffs 8 straight years. The minute he gets injured, they fall apart like a cheap bag of bricks. Bottom line is Aaron Rodgers is the baddest man on the planet. As far as I'm concerned, he is special. He deserves every dollar that he can get. We look at the hindrance those dollars would cause to the rest of the team. Then to me, that falls on the Players Association and the teams themselves to come up with some kind of alternative to make sure that the greatest, the best, the most productive, not just on the field of play, but those most responsible for generating revenue for a team and the respective sport it plays in, they should be equitably compensated accordingly. And I think that when we have a league that endorses that not being the case, I think it builds a level of frustration. I'm not going to fault the NFL for taking advantage of it, because if the Players Association allows rules to be in place that enables owners and teams to get away with that, then that's on them. Major League Baseball.
You know, people have to understand this about the NFL Players Association. I equate it to a mother that has 10 children. There's always going to be far more stress on her because she has 10 children as opposed to the mother that has 2 children. Now, people will say, well, it's the mother's fault for having that many kids. That's true, but when she has them, she has them. There's going to be far more stress on her. Why do I say that? The NFL Players Association has to preside over far more players than the NBA Players Association does. That's why it's easier for the NBA Players Association to negotiate the splitting of the pie, because they know that each player is going to receive such astronomical numbers once they are able to cement these television deals and now these gambling deals, that people are going to be satiated by it no matter what. And plus, the contracts are guaranteed. In the NFL, each roster has something like 53 men on it. So it's very difficult for DeMaurice Smith to go into the negotiations with a Roger Goodell and the NFL owners and say, we want every player's contract to be fully guaranteed. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen, especially since in the NFL, most of the fans relate more to the emblem on the helmet than the name on the back of the jersey. The NBA is different. The NBA is a league to exalt individuals and encourage fanboyism, much more than the NFL is.
Baseball certainly doesn't allow that to take place, but in the end, when we're talking about the...
Baseball does not have the level of liability due to injury to its players that the NFL does, Stephen A.
The issue of fairness, the fact of the matter is, if an owner is allowed to maximize his marketing potential to the benefit of himself and the league, a player should certainly be in position to do the same. And I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to test it in that regard, because the reason why they're sitting there talking about Aaron Rodgers, whose contract is not expiring, you're talking to him about that, Max, is because it's like, yo, he's a bad man. And you have to take care of him when you're watching Matthew Stafford and other people like Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy G, with 7 career starts, getting paid the kind of money he's getting paid.
I want to explain this to people. I want to take this moment to do it. This is a teaching moment. And I'm glad that we have this topic in the show. Doesn't matter what Aaron Rodgers gets in this deal. Like, resetting the market, it really doesn't matter. And let me explain why. The negotiation as to how much money the players get takes place during the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, right? The collective bargaining agreement. When you have that in place, that determines what percentage of the revenue will go to the players. That's capped. Whatever number that winds up being, it's capped. That's it. So players are always the teams are always robbing Peter to pay Paul. If you pay Aaron Rodgers, you let him reset the market, that helps the rich players because the best players will become...
Thank you, sir. That's my point. I have no idea why Stephen A. Smith is trying to correlate Aaron Rodgers' negotiations for his contract with what Russell Okung was saying. One has nothing to do with the other.
Become even richer, but that money will come at the expense of their teammates. The whole idea of a salary cap, which people say is for competitive balance, that's nonsense. This is the only thing a salary cap does. It takes money from the players and gives it back to the owners. Now, you might argue it takes money from the rich players and gives it back to the small market owners so that they may compete with the big market owners. But that's not really true because there are other ways to make sure that the rich teams the big market teams can subsidize smaller market teams.
Max Kellerman, part of what you say is true, but a lot of it's not true. The fact of the matter is that being able to cap salaries does allow for smaller market teams to compete with larger market teams. An example of that is with the New York Yankees, who were able to dominate baseball in the 1990s. But when Major League Baseball decided to place greater restrictions on how teams were bringing in revenue, you saw them come back to the pack in the mid-2000s, and they've been nowhere near as dominant.
Baseball does it with a luxury tax. You may say, well, football has better parity than baseball. I would disagree with that. It's just that the parity is not just reflected by big markets are dominating. There's still not really parity. It's just that sometimes the small markets win.
No, sir. There's much more parity in the NFL. There's no doubt about that.
The point is this, where oftentimes the non-major markets can dominate. The point is this. Aaron Rodgers resetting the market doesn't change how much money you can spend on players. All it means is you can't pay other players on your team as much so that it keeps the...
Once again, Max Kellerman, I think that you're missing the point just as Stephen A. Smith missed the point. I don't even think that Russell Okung's point is that he was looking for a greater slice of the pie. All he was saying is that the slice that he gets, he wants to guarantee he's going to be able to eat the whole thing. That's it. He doesn't want to have a slice cut for him and then he takes one bite and then he can't have any more because the slice gets taken back because he can no longer play. That's what his contention is. Now, you and Stephen A. Smith are making other points that are based in different arguments that should be had on another day.
The competitive balance, it prevents the Packers from being much better than everyone else. It doesn't actually do what people seem to think it does.
So, Max, what do they do?
More money.
Do they need to strike?
That takes place in the CBA.
Do they need to strike in 2020?
They need to threaten to, sure.
No, sir. They don't need to threaten to do anything. They need to either do it or don't do it. And when you do it, be prepared to go all the way until you win or until you cripple the NFL to such a degree that the owners have to change their entire protocol and process of how they interact with you. That's the only thing that you can do. Do not threaten to do something that you have no intention on doing. That makes no sense and makes you look weak. And that's how the NFL Players Association has looked for many of these negotiations over the past 15 or 20 years or so.
Yeah, they need to threaten.
May I respond to what Max said?
Of course.
Max, you missed two key words in your soliloquy there. You know what those words are? For now.
What's that?
For now.
What? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said the words for now. For now are the two words that you left out of your soliloquy. Here's what I mean. If Aaron Rodgers resets the market, as you say, right? And essentially all he's doing is costing lower rung players dollars, right? Then ultimately when you go back to the negotiating table and you start legitimately counting the dollars that is pouring in to the NFL coffers. I'm not talking about football-related income because that's something that goes on during the basketball negotiations as well. There's income and then there's basketball-related income. It's not all encompassed. It's not all of this money in a pot and then all of a sudden we're splitting it 50-50 or 53-47 or whatever the case may be. Right. It's what the owners are allowed to parse and say, this is applicable to basketball-related income. This is the rest of the money that you have nothing to do with. What I'm saying is, I'm talking about all of it. If you are a player, if you are the Players Association, you need to be adroit enough in collective bargaining, all right, and labor relations. You need to be adroit, or labor negotiations rather. You need to be adroit enough to make sure that you're able to identify the amount of dollars that is coming into the league.
That's a very good point, Stephen A. Smith, but I also don't think that that point has anything to do with what Russell Okung is talking about. But what you're saying right now is much closer to what he's talking about.
And fight for more of that. Therefore, you don't have the argument to make that Aaron Rodgers' dollars is just costing the lower rung players. You got to figure out a way to make sure that it doesn't cost them as much. That's the trick, which is why the Players Association is so important in any sport. There are competent individuals like the Players Association with Major League Baseball.
Well, Stephen A. Smith, if you know that level of recalibration needs to be done, why are you trying to put any level of onus on Aaron Rodgers and his current contractual renegotiation? Unless you just want to be able to say his name in a segment on your show because you're a fanboy of his. As Max Kellerman was saying, for Aaron Rodgers to renegotiate his contract, all that's going to do is impact the players of his ilk. We already know who they are: Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, and maybe a Russell Wilson. They're all looking to see what Aaron Rodgers is doing because what he does is going to affect them. That's not what Russell Okung is talking about. Now, since you mentioned the potential collective bargaining negotiations in 2020 and the knowledge that the Players Association needs to have for the total amount of revenue that's streaming into the NFL coffers, then yes, that is going to change exactly how large a piece of the pie the NFL owners get, which is also going to change how each player on an NFL roster salary is affected by a big wig on their team getting paid all that money. It's going to change it. But once again, that's not the issue. That's not what Russell Okung is talking about. He's not talking about making sure that your third string safety can get $500K instead of $250K after Aaron Rodgers signs his big deal. He's saying, I want to make sure that everyone on the team is guaranteed to get their paycheck no matter what happens to them on the football field. And neither one of you have touched on that point during this debate, quote-unquote debate.
Baseball has religiously had at their disposal,
Yeah.
and then
We
you
gotta
have
go
those
back.
that complain about the NFL.
That comes at the negotiating table
Yeah.
with the owners, not team to Aaron
Yeah,
Rodgers.
well, that's why
That's
DeMaurice
the CBA.
Smith has come out and said when this expires, that there will be a work stoppage. So I think we all expect that to potentially happen.
Yes, it's going to be a work stoppage, and most likely the NFL Players Association is going to embarrass themselves again. To be quite frank with you, the NFL players have been embarrassing themselves since they ratified the last collective bargaining agreement back in 2012 or 2013, whenever that was, because they just don't know what the hell they're doing. And they've tried to compensate for their embarrassment and how they basically got ravished at the negotiations table by engaging in a lot of these protests on the NFL football field, which is basically equivalent to a child throwing a tantrum because they're not getting their way. They're going to have to up their level of cognitive acumen if they want to be taken seriously by these NFL owners and leave the emotion where it belongs, outside of the bargaining table room. But anyway, peace.